contrived to open the window close to the back door, and was remaining quite close to it with a pistol in his hand, apparently not wishing to run the risk of climbing in. Edward slipped under the eaves of the cottage, not 6 feet from the man, who remained with his back partly turned to him. Edward then, finding he had obtained this position unperceived, crouched down with his gun ready pointed. As Edward remained in this position, he heard a shrill voice cry out, "They are getting in behind!" and a movement in cottage. The man near him, who had his pistol in his hand, put his arm through the window and fired inside. A shriek was given, and Edward fired his gun into the body of the man, who immediately fell. Edward lost no time in reloading his gun, during which he heard the bursting open of the front door and the report of firearms. Then all was silent for a moment, excepting the wailing of somebody within. As soon as his gun was reloaded, Edward walked around to the front of the cottage, where he found the man who was called Ben, lying across the threshold of the open door. He stepped across the body, and, looking into the room within, perceived a body stretched on the floor, and a young lad weeping over it. "Don't be alarmed. I am a friend," said Edward, going in to where the body lay, and, taking the light which was at the farther end of the chamber, he placed it on the floor, that he might examine the state of the person, who was breathing heavily and apparently badly wounded. "Rise up, my lad," said Edward, "and let me see if I can be of any use." "No, no," cried the boy, throwing back his long hair from his temples. "He bleeds to death." "Bring me some water, quick," said Edward. "There's a good lad, while I'll see where he is hurt." The boy ran up to fetch the water, and Edward discovered that the ball had entered the neck above the collarbone, and that the blood poured out of the man's mouth, who was choking with the effusion. Although ignorant of surgery, Edward thought that such a wound must be mortal. But the man was not only alive, but sensible, and although he could not utter a word, he spoke with his eyes and with signs. He raised his hand and pointed to himself first, and shook his head as if to say that it was all over for him. And then he turned around his head, as if looking for the lad, who was now returning with the water. When the lad again knelt by his side, weeping bitterly, the man pointed to him, and gave such an imploring look that Edward immediately comprehended what he wished. It was to ask protection for the boy. It could not be misunderstood, and could Edward do otherwise than promise it to the dying man? His generous nature could not refuse it, and he said, "I understand you. You wish me to take care of your boy when you are gone. Is it not so?" The man signified assent. "I promise you I will do so. I will take him into my own family, and he will share with us." The man raised his hand again, and a gleam of joy passed over his features as he took the hand of the lad and put it into that of Edward. His eyes were then fixed upon Edward as if to scrutinize into his character by his features, while the former bathed his temples and washed the blood from his mouth with the water brought by the boy, who appeared in a state of grief so violent as to paralyze his senses. After a minute or two, another effusion of blood choked the wounded man, who, after a short struggle, fell back dead. "He is gone," thought Edward, "and now what is to be done? I must first ascertain whether the two villains are dead or not." Edward took a light and examined the body of Ben lying over the threshold of the door. The man was quite dead, the ball having entered his brain. He was proceeding around the outside of the cottage to examine the state of the other man, whom he had shot himself, but the wind nearly blew out the light, and he therefore returned to the chamber, placed it on the floor, near to where the boy lay insensible over the corpse of the man who had died in the arms of Edward, and then went out without a light and with his gun to the other side of the cottage, where the other robber had fallen. As he approached the man, a faint voice was heard to say, "Ben, Ben, some water, for the love of God! Ben, I'm done for!" Edward, without giving an answer, went back to the room for the water, which he took round to the man, and put it to his lips. He felt that he was bound by humanity so to do to a dying man, scoundrel though he might be. It was still dark, but not so dark as it had previously been, for the late moon was just rising. The man drank the water eagerly, and said, "Ben, I can speak now, but I shan't long." He then pulled the basin toward him again, and after he had drank, he said in broken sentences, "I feel that I'm bleeding to death inside." Then he paused. "You know the oak struck by lightning a mile north of this?" "Oh, I'm going fast. 3 yards from it south. I buried all my money. It's yours. Oh, another drink." The man again attempted to drink out of the basin proffered by Edward, but as he made the attempt, he fell back with a groan. Edward, perceiving that he was dead, returned to the cottage to look after the lad, who still remained prostrate, and embracing the corpse in the chamber. Edward then reflected upon what had best be done. After a time, he decided upon dragging away the body of the robber named Ben outside of the threshold, and then securing the door. This, with some trouble, he effected, and he then made fast the window that had been forced open behind. Before he removed the boy, who lay with his face buried on the corpse, and appeared to be in a state of insensibility, Edward examined the corpse as it lay. Although plainly dressed, yet it was evident that it was not the body of a rustic. The features were fair, and the beard was carefully cut. The hands were white, and the fingers long, and evidently had never been employed in labor. That the body was that of some superior person disguised as a rustic was evident, and this was corroborated by the conversation which took place between the two robbers. "Alas," thought Edward, "the family of Arnwood appear not to be the only people who are in disguise in this forest. That poor boy, he must not remain there." Edward looked around, and perceived that there was a bed in the adjoining room, the door of which was open. He lifted up the boy, and carried him, still insensible, into the room, and laid him on the bed. He then went for some more water, which he found and threw into his face, and poured a little into his mouth. Gradually the boy stirred, and recovered from his stupor, and then Edward held the water to his mouth, and made him drink some, which he did. And then, suddenly aroused to a recollection of what had passed, the boy gave a shriek of woe, and burst into a paroxysm of tears. This ended in convulsive sobbings and low moanings. Edward felt that he could do no more at present, and that it would be better if he was left for a time to give vent to his grief. Edward sat down on a stool by the side of the orphan, and remained for some time in deep and melancholy thought. "How strange," thought he at last, "it is that I should feel so little as I do now, surrounded by death, compared to what I did when good old Jacob Armitage died. Then I felt it deeply, and there was an awe in death. Now I no longer dread it. Is it because I love